All right, so let's start with chapter 7 on bacteria. Let's talk about, we're talking about bacteria, we're talking about prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells thrive almost everywhere. Places that you can't imagine that anything could survive. Do you know some of them can live in places like, some places very salty or very hot. Hot like geysers. Can you imagine anything could live? You go to Old Faithful and there's some hot springs just gushing up and you can see the steam coming off. Do you know prokaryotic cells can live there? How about under kilometers of ice in Greenland or Antarctica? Would you think anything could survive there? They can, but they're prokaryotic cells. Most are microscopic. It says what they lack in size, they make up for in number. Now this third bullet point, I don't have on your sheet, but it's important. I think it's like a true-false because it's so cool. Would be a good thing to kind of like start conversation with somebody. I mean, have you ever just like been somewhere and you feel like somebody needs to say something and nobody knows what to say? How many of y'all feel like you're the one that needs to say something? Or me too. Like I'm thinking, how can those other people just sit there and wait for me to say something? Well, if they know me, they know I will. But this is something good you can say. There are more, you can say, did you know there are more, in a handful of fertile soil, there are more prokaryotic organisms than people who have ever lived. Now that's shocking. I mean, if I had just told you, if you get a handful of fertile soil, that there are more microorganisms in that handful of fertile soil than people that are living today, that's pretty surprising. But no, that's not what I said. I said, than have ever lived. Wow. Okay. You know, do your parents ever, when you say something, do you ever hear your parents in your head? Well, when you get to be a parent, you'll hear your kids in your head. You know, like every time I say that, I hear my son saying, Mom, that's not that scientific. Like, what size of hand is that? Is that your hand or my hand? Okay, really. When we're talking about that big, it doesn't matter. You get the gist. There's a lot. There are a lot of prokaryotic organisms. And that's what I'm saying. If you just want to start up a conversation with somebody, you can do that. In one of my classes, in the interactive class, at one site, it was funny because another site would talk back and forth to my site at Harriman. And at Harriman, there was one of the guys, and he was really cut up with him. And they said, hey, Andrew, why don't you use that next time you want to pick up a girl? And he goes, well, maybe I'll try that. So a couple of weeks goes by, and I said, did you ever try that? And he said, well, yeah, I was at this party. And he goes, I saw this really pretty girl, and I went up and I said that. And they said, what'd she say? And they said, she just looked at me real like I was really weird. And so he thought it was a failure. And I said, wait, Andrew, that girl, what was her GPA? I said, like, if her GPA was 1.5, that is not going to impress her. I said, so not only will this impress the right people, it will do out, you know, because if like you're into really, he made good grades. And so that kind of like, it's like a thing for dating to eliminate, you know, to kind of get people that want to study and not study together. I mean, don't y'all think that's true? Usually people that are studious stick together, and people that aren't, that don't care. Not that that's bad, but it would drive me crazy if I were not studious and somebody was always studying, or vice versa. But anyway, he kind of laughed. I said, next time you need to say, what's your GPA? Or that just tells you. If they just look at you like you're weird, you know, then just walk away and say, okay, that's good. We found out up front that she's not interested in the same thing I'm interested in. But you might remember that. You know, I don't think it's gotten out too far so people won't know it's a lie. It's a fact. All right, let's keep going. So number 1 on your sheet. What are the most abundant organisms on Earth? Have I convinced you that you should put prokaryotes there? Okay. Anna?
Yeah.
Can you write pretty neat?
Yeah.
Would you do that for me, Lee?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Now, if you trust her, that's fine.
I trust her.
If you fail the test because of hers,
Blame
then
it on her.
you blame it on her. Okay. What are the major differences in prokaryotics and eukaryotics? Now, this goes back to Biology 1, and I know that if you're in my class, you know this because you got sick of me talking. You all think that's my middle name. I know, but it's really important. It's why I keep doing it. Let's go over it just to make sure because everybody didn't stress that same thing. So let's make us a little, that's kind of pretty. It looks like snow or something. Okay. Our little chart, we have prokaryotics and eukaryotics. So let's do this. I'm going to put pro and U. And I told you that carry-on, which is the base root word of that, means nucleus. So EU means true, so that should help you remember that eukaryotes have a true nucleus. They really do have a nucleus. So let's start off with the size. Do you remember what I want you to put for the size? You don't have to have some memorized number of, nanometers or something like that, because that's not going to be meaningful. So what do you think I want you to say for size for prokaryotic cells? Yeah, how about very, very small? Okay? I understand that. Do you? Microscopic if you want to. How about eukaryotic cells? Yeah, I like that, Tara. Bigger. How's that? Bigger than prokaryotic cells. Okay, nucleus. Do prokaryotic cells have a nucleus? No. Oh, you all are so good. You remembered, didn't you? How about eukaryotic cells? See, I didn't even have to go over this, did I? So good. How about a nuclear membrane? No and yes. Do you remember that? What three things do all cells? I don't have that down here. So let me just ask you. So that if you don't know this, you might jot it down. But if you were in my class, I bet you know it because I kind of talked about it a lot. What do all cells have? What four things do all cells have? If you're going to be a cell, you have to have this, or I'm not going to call you a cell. Number one. DNA. They don't have to have a nucleus, but they have to have DNA. Because if they don't have DNA, how can they reproduce? For example, let me show you. So let me just draw it up here. Here's a prokaryotic cell, and here's their DNA. Here's a eukaryotic cell, and here's their DNA. But notice what it has. Do you see it's got the nuclear membrane? But they both have DNA. So if you want, you could add to this and put DNA, question mark, yes, yes.
You have it on there.
Do I?
It's
Oh,
on
yeah, I
there,
do. Okay. What else? Organelles. No, yes. Okay, DNA, we said yes, yes. How about ribosomes? Is that something that everybody has if you're a cell?
Yes.
Yes. What's the purpose of ribosomes? Why do you have to have a ribosome to be called a cell? What do? They make proteins. You can't make it without a protein. Viruses, when we talk about them, that's actually the last thing we talk about, but they're really cool. Viruses are not considered living. People say they're kind of a borrowed kind of life because they can't reproduce outside of I'll say a body. It can be as a living organism. You know what the big thing they're missing? Ribosomes. They've got DNA or RNA, one or the other. They've got their genetic information, but they don't have anything to make it with to get the ball rolling. You can have the instructions, but if you don't have the machinery to get everything going on the road, it's not going to happen. Okay, what about plasma membrane? That's something plasma membrane, yes. Plasma membrane, yes. Domains included. I'm going to write this up here because some of y'all in the back may have a hard time seeing this. Okay, so what domains are we talking about when we're talking about prokaryotic? We talked about eukaryotic most last time. Domains for this. What are the three domains? Remember that? That's a kingdom. How about if I give you the letters B-E-A? Does that help?
Well,
Yes.
Bacteria.
Yes.
And
Okay.
eukarya.
This is euchara, which makes sense. That's the domain for eukaryotic cells. And what are the two for here?
Bacteria.
Yes.
Archaea.
Bacteria is a domain, and archaea. Actually, 27 is about archaea and bacteria. We won't talk about archaea as much. They're the extremophiles, the ones that live in the really odd environments. As far as we know, there's never been an archaea organism that caused an infection or any kind. It's not pathogenic at all. Now, I'm laughing to myself when I read that fact, because I thought, well, I mean, like, who's gonna get in a hot springs to get around them? Or who's gonna go diving under kilometers of frozen ice? Like, I don't know. I don't think they've taken any and tried to infect people with it that I know of. So I'm not really sure how valid that statement is. But archaea are like bacteria. In fact, when I was in school, they just lumped them all together, and they just called them extremophiles. But now they said they have less peptidoglycan. Their cell wall, they both have cell walls, but they're different, so they divide them into two domains. You'll need to know this, even if it's not in your book. This is from last semester, but I'm assuming that you'll know it, okay? And I'm just reminding you. What 4 kingdoms are under Euchara? And the reason I'm asking you this is because every time we come to a chapter, when we talk about plants, I'm going to say, what domain? What kingdom? When we talk about paramecium, I'm going to say, what domain? What kingdom? When we talk about every single thing, fungus, what's the domain? What's the kingdom? So let's know what are the kingdoms. We don't do the kingdoms for GDOMS. You don't have to know the kingdoms for that. But what are the 4 kingdoms for Euchara? Now this is where you want to say, you said Animalia. Right, okay. You can say animals or Animalia, whatever. What else? Plants?
Fungus.
Fungus? Yes.
First.
Protist. Or protist, or whichever. Okay, y'all know what animals are? What goes under there, and you know what plants. You know what fungus are? Molds, mushrooms, things like that. Molds, mushrooms, and yeast. Molds, mushrooms, and yeast. Protista, you know what's under that, in that kingdom? Any guesses? Algae? A lot of things that live in ponds. Paramecium, amoebas, things like that. The causative agent of malaria, and we'll talk about all that. So we'll talk about each of these different kingdoms, and one of the first things we'll start out is what's the domain, what's the kingdom. Do you remember when we do our classification for taxonomy, we start out with domain, then we go to kingdom, and we're getting more specific as we go. Darn, king, Philip, that'd be the phylum. Cain, class, over, order, family, genus, species. So when I say E. coli, I'm saying genus, species. This is the most specific. This would be like saying Cummings, Claudia. I'm saying it's kind of like doing the last name first. Okay, so now that you have the classification straight, anybody have a question? If you weren't in my class last semester, it would probably take a lot of pressure off of the ones that were, that you could ask a question because I don't expect you to know. But see, some of these people that are in my class that don't remember any of this, it's like a little embarrassing to ask. So if you would ask questions, it would help them out. Anybody have a question? Okay. So that's number 3. And we got number 4, how many beneficial bacteria, viruses, and fungus live in the digestive tract? We got that from our fun sheet.
That's like 90%, right?
Well, that's not what I'm asking. How many? This is going to be a number. Look at number 1 on your fun sheet.
Oh,
100 trillion. Right. Now let's go on for number 5. 90% of the cells in our body are bacterial rather than human. Okay, now if I turn the projector back on, then we'll catch up with the slides. Any question about that? All right, prokaryotic cells have astonishing genetic diversity, and they're divided into 2 domains, which we said. This is showing you some that live, these would be archaea that live in this kind of environment here. Most are unicellular, although some form colonies, which means if you're looking at and I need to bring an agar plate in and show you, because you don't really, I don't know that you see them in lab, but we throw them on an agar plate, and they look like like this. okay, here's your autoclave, and agar is kind of like a jello substance like that, kind of. And then after you streak it out with bacteria, you'll come back and you'll see like this. You know, some of them would be big or whatever. And you'll think, what you'll say is, oh, I'm going to count the number of bacteria. But each one, actually, that's a colony. So you're counting the number of colonies. Because most of them do grow in colonies. Because if that were one bacteria, you could not see it without looking under the microscope. You know, but I'm just saying, looking at the plate, you can see that. But what you see there, the correct thing would be, how many colonies do you see? And that's what that's saying. Some of them form those colonies. Most are, and it tells you the dimensions. Most of them are smaller than eukaryotic. They have a variety of shapes. This is, I don't see that I have this on your sheet, but write it down. The 3 most common shapes of bacteria. The 3 most common shapes of bacteria. Let me show you a picture. First of all, we have ones that are cocci or spherical. They're like round balls, like spheres. Ones that are like that would be, you know what causes most of your sore throats would be strep throat, which is streptococcus. And anytime the name ends in coccus, you know it's going to be a round bacteria like that. This one, strepto, that means it's in a chain. Sometimes you'll say diplococcus, which means you have 2 coccus together. The causative agent of MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, that looks like this. They're coccus, but they grow like this. It kind of looks like grapes under the microscope. Kind of like that. That would be Staph aureus. But that's coccus again. Then we go to the second. Now, of course, there's variations, but these are the 3 main ones. The next one would be rod-shaped or bacilli. You should go over these in lab. I don't care if you call them rod-shaped or bacilli, but I know there was one lab instructor here. She's not here now. I don't know about the others, but if you didn't say bacilli, she counted it wrong. So you might want to learn them both. But these, to me, look like extra strength Tylenol. You know the shape of those capsules? E. coli are in that shape. And some of those will, actually E. coli is more of a, kind of between the two, it's more of a short fat, kind of like that, and it will be like end to end like that. If you do lactobacillus, they're more long, elongated. That's like a bunch of link sausages, and I know that's not a very good drawing, but that's how they look. Then we have these that are spiral shaped. They can look like a column, or they can just look like something like that. So that's our third one, is spiral shape. So make a note of that, of the 3 shapes. All right, an important feature of nearly all prokaryotic cells is their cell wall. Now, in Biology 1, I made sure that you knew that who does not have a cell wall? We don't have a cell wall, right? In fact, if I were to say, do prokaryotic organisms have a cell wall? What do you think your answer should be? Yes. Now, if you wanted to be specific, you could say almost always, because there are a couple that we could talk about that don't. But if we're just going to make a generalization, which I love to do, we're going to say yes. What about if I said, do eukaryotic organisms have a cell wall? What would you say?
No.
Yes. We can't really make it. We'd say some yes, some don't. Animals, do they have cell walls? No. Plants? Yes. And what's their cell wall made up of? Cellulose, right. What about fungus? That's the chitin. Remember? C-H-I-T-I-N. See right there. Eukaryotic cell walls are made up of cellulose. That's going to be your plant. Or chitin. That's your fungus. What about protists? Do they have cell walls? You know what? This is one time that you all, no matter what you say, is going to be right.
Yes, and
Some of them do, and that's the most diverse group of anything. The only thing pretty much that you can say definitively about a protist is that it's a eukaryotic organism. Other than that, when we get on that chapter, you can pretty much say, if I ever say all of them do, say, oops, I caught her on that one. It can't be all. Some do, some don't. All right, so bacteria do have cell walls. What is the purpose? What are the three main functions of their cell walls? Let me see if I have that.
It was on that other page.
It was on the other?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It is
See, I
true.
have this on the new one. I'm highlighting these in different colors to make it colorful for you. Okay, this is it. Maintains the cell shape. We're about to finish here. Which I think it would be nice if I had me a little cell wall, because, you know, that way you wouldn't have to keep getting bigger and bigger, you know. It also provides physical protection. It's kind of like a little armor around it. They do have a cell membrane, but this is what they have on the outside. Here's your cell wall. Okay? And the third thing is it prevents the cell from bursting in a hypotonic environment. When it takes in a bunch of water, if it's got a cell wall, it's probably not going to burst. But if you didn't have a cell wall, then you would probably burst. All right, that tells you severe water loss inhibits cell reproduction. Let me tell you this one last thing. You know, have you ever had a salt-cured ham? And it doesn't have to be refrigerated. You know, you can get it through UPS. In fact, we got one through UPS from my uncle, and they delivered it at my front door, and my dog had a feast before we found it. How can you do that? And how can you eat ham that's not refrigerated? Don't bacteria like ham? They do, but if it's salt cured, you know what the salt does? It inhibits bacterial growth because it pulls water out. Salt is going to pull the water out. When you pull the water out, that stops their reproduction. So that's a good way to keep your things safe. Okay, let's start with number 7 on Wednesday. And we'll talk about what is the bacterial cell wall like. We will not have a quiz on Wednesday unless y'all want to. I think this is pretty, let's just wait till next Monday.